Oh, there we go. Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome to another edition of the Caspian Game Awards. So, I am your host, Sly the Emu Emperor, or Dave Caspian, or whatever you want to call me. And, well, we got ourselves episode 3, technically, of this sort of, I guess you can call it a podcast, but I can call it a Game Award show. I just call it an award ceremony because, frankly, that's kind of what this is. And I'm pretty excited to get back into this. And yes, this is probably going to be a weekly sort of series, so we'll be doing this every Saturday from now on, or at least until the foreseeable future. There will be some Saturdays I won't be able to do it, and I'll have to do it on Fridays, but either way, I am so excited about continuing on with this series. So, and don't worry, I'll have other guests come in, some other guest hosts to do this series on, but I'm pretty excited regardless. But today we are going to be talking about 2021. Yeah. So if you thought 2022 was pretty bad, 2021 was actually, I'm just going to be blunt about this. 2021 was actually very difficult to try to find games for representing each of these individual winners because, oh boy. And we'll obviously get into the nominees for what the actual Game Awards gave out. But yeah, whatever. You guys probably already know the drill. But for those who don't know, hi, welcome. My name is Sly. Sorry, I just got into this. So, okay. Actually, before we do this, I hope you guys do genuinely enjoy me doing these. If you guys do, please hit that follow button down below and turn on that bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly when I'll be streaming. We are, of course, working all the way back from the present day up until 1995 when it comes to our particular rankings, because keep in mind, this is kind of my interpretation on what games deserve certain awards for each representative year. So if you want more context on exactly how we're doing everything here, go watch our previous episodes on 2023 and 2022 respectively. I'll obviously give a bit of a refresher for everyone who is joining in and is new to this, but rest assured, this one's going to be a bit of an iffy episode because 2021 was, I'm just going to be blunt, was actually a not very good year for gaming. So, but what are we going to be categorizing? So far, it's going to be the same that we've done before. So, best indie game, best action-adventure game, best RPG, best shooter, best sim strategy, multiplayer, DLC, remake/remaster, art direction, narrative, and of course, the titular game of the year. We still have studio debuts sort of marked off for now, but do keep in mind, we will be making sure that in the 2020 episode, I'll definitely consider adding it, as well as with the sports/racing/fighting games, because, again, keep in mind, sports and racing games generally aren't really my thing, and even then, there's really not that many great sports racing games that have been out in a while. And as far as studio debuts, I want to wait at least 5 years to see if that said studio or that game from a said studio was pretty much, either lightning in a bottle or if they genuinely did pretty good. So do keep that in mind. And I will also be kind of like removing some categories as well, depending on just like throughout this thing or just changing around depending on what goes on with games from a certain year. So, I mean, I was almost considering it for 2021 if I'm just going to be straight up honest, but thankfully I was able to find just enough games as far as these particular categories. But as far as how we do things on this show, I'm going to give you guys a bit of a refresher for those who are new to this sort of format. So, I have criteria when it comes to how we're doing a bunch of these, nominees as well as the winners for each respective category. So, rule number 1, and this is a very important one, is it has to be a game that had to have released between January 1st and December 31st of that respective year. We are not doing any weird cutoff dates. We make sure that we cover the entire year from beginning to end with no weird, stupid Grammy shit. Again, I don't think I need to repeat myself. But freaking Crash, just fucking say it.
Don't yell at me, yell at the Grammys.
Yeah, so we're not doing any of that shit. As far as games go, oh shoot, I forgot this. I changed things a little bit from last time. That's not supposed to say that, though. I am gonna change. Oh shoot, I can't change. Okay, that's not supposed to say games have to have a 75% or higher. I changed that last time because 2022 and especially this year 2021 were so goddamn abrasive when it came to user reviews on sites like Metacritic that I just could not do that. I did that for 2023. I edited it in the previous episode, so let me just make sure that I give you the proper thing of what that's supposed to say. Yes, basically it had to have been a game that had to have at least some generally accepted, a game that like generally I knew people liked or that had a decent launch. Games fixed after the fact will not be considered unless if there's like a specific thing. So we're not judging based off of Metacritic scores. We're just judging it based off of my personal vibes. So do keep that in mind. Number 3, no early access games. So games like Valheim, which came out in early access in 2021. I do apologize, but as those were early access releases, they do not qualify for this list. And how that game is still in early access. So no games in beta, alpha, pre-alpha, or anything under that sun. As for Game of the Year itself, the rules for that, it needs to be a game that has at least 80% or higher of a score from Metacritic to be accepted. Which let me just double check to make sure that that is the case, because I think I added in a couple of games after the fact. I know the winner was got that pretty much under the belt, so that I'm not really concerned about. Though I do need to check. Sorry, it's just okay. Yeah, it's just one game I need to check. Okay, yes, okay. So, yeah, it has to be a game that has at least an 80% or higher from Metacritic to be accepted. And also, it has to be a completely new game. So no remasters or remakes are allowed on Game of the Year. And that also applies with pretty much every other category, except for the remake remaster category. So do keep that in mind. And last but not least, we're just going off of my personal takes and my personal opinions and biases. Because for me, the art style, the aesthetics, and the gameplay of franchises matters to me because my interests different from a lot of others. And I hope you guys do respect that. And I hope you guys, are. And again, at the end of the day, I'm just here to have fun and just kind of give my personal takes on what I personally would have considered to have been either game of the year or best game of a respective category. If you disagree, that is completely fine. Obviously, let us know down in the comments once I re-upload this. Chat if you guys are over there. So, but anyways, I think I got all the rules down. So, I think it's about time we actually get into this. So, yeah, let's start this. So, and this time I got the envelope this time. No more of this bullshit. Yes, I still have this, but yeah, no more of this. We got ourselves an actual envelope for us to do our thing because I think it's funny, and also this is way more appropriate. Though I probably do need to get a new piece of paper. So yeah, this is an awards ceremony show in spirit. So, but yeah, either way, let's get into this. So, and again, keep in mind, if a category was actually presented on the Game Awards, I will be showcasing those, nominations and that winner first. And I'll just kind of show you what I personally would have changed and what I would have actually have nominated and what I would have given the winner. So do keep that in mind. Anyways, let's talk about best indie game. So again, these are games that are created by a small studio or just one person or just a small group of people. So what did the Game Awards, this was one of the categories that they did. What were exactly the games that they nominated? So let's get over that. Not a bad list, if I'm gonna be honest. Not terrible at all. There's some that I definitely disagree with on here, but I'll get into those once we get into it. Let's talk about the games that I actually do agree with being on here. The first one that I personally agree with is Death's Door. This is an action adventure sort of dungeon crawler style game. It's not a roguelike, but it kind of honestly looked similar to a roguelike. It's just a more general action adventure game. It's actually more in line with a game like Zelda than like those types of games. And I think it's actually a pretty cool, at least looking visual, it's a really cool visually game sort of style. With its more fantasy adjacent undertones. And that sort of Zelda inspired gameplay, I can understand why this was nominated. Also, Kena Bridge Spirits. This game is fucking beautiful. This game, you would be hard pressed to confuse this with as a AAA game. It's not a AAA game. It's an indie game, and it's a damn amazing looking game at that. And not just that, but also it's sort of 2000s action adventure inspired gameplay. Lends for it kind of, obviously it's heavily inspired, but it takes its own cues. As far as, the sort of world building that it has, as well as the different uses of said mechanics, especially when you're sort of controlling all the creatures and you use them to help you with all the attacks and stuff. That is pretty creative. And yeah, it's a bit more of a, I don't want to say it's a touching story, but it's definitely a story that will make you think. So I gotta give credit where credit is due with Kena. And then of course we've got Inscription, which this game just kind of I feel like this was kind of a sleeper hit at first, but it got a bunch of attention within the next month. As a matter of fact, I actually remember when one of my friends, which I haven't seen in a while. Again, I don't want to get into my personal life. I've already done that too many times. Um, I was actually at the apartment of one of my friends that I haven't seen in years, and this was one of the games that they were actually playing. Um, and just the visual style that this game invokes is so interesting. I don't want to get into spoilers too much, but the game doesn't just only look like this. If you've heard of Inscription or whatever, like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It is honestly one of the most fascinating, well, it's a card game, but just sort of dungeon crawler games as well. Like, go check it out. It's actually one of the coolest things I've seen an indie game do in quite some time. So, yeah, like those three picks, I do genuinely agree with. The other ones, though, not so much. Loop Hero, for example, is just one of those games where it's like, again, I'm showing my bias here, so do keep that in mind. But honestly, it's mostly due to the fact that it's a roguelike. I know Inscription's kind of a roguelike too, but not really. It's more like the Inscription is a genuine dungeon crawler sort of game where you progress per just sort of area. You don't lose all your progress in one fell swoop. Whereas with Loop Hero you do. And that's sort of gameplay I'm getting sick and tired of when it comes to roguelikes. I know there's like some people who are diehards when it comes to like the roguelike genre, or roguelites as they called them. Again, I don't want to get into technicalities, especially since that starts getting into what I consider bullshit genres. I don't just say that with music, I say that with video games too. But as far as like those style of games go, I'm sorry, I just can't stand those types of games, especially since a lot of those are a dime a dozen. There's very few exceptions to that rule though. Hades, Dead Cells, um kind of Risk of Rain, but even then co-op, single player, no. And there was another one. Oh, and Cold the Lamb. That is it for me. Like, Loop Hero, Binding of Isaac, fucking, I mean, Ziggurat was a prime example of one I fucking despised. So, like, I don't like those types of games because I consider it to be just repetitive and in some ways cheap, just cheap replay value. So I do not agree with Loop Hero being on here, especially since, especially around 2020, like around this time as well, there was getting that genre admittedly was starting to get way too overmilked, especially like specifically when it comes to the indie scene. And then we have 12 minutes, which, yeah, no. This one is it's a puzzle-like game, I guess. I'm okay. Admittedly, I kind of okay. Is okay. Let me just double check to make sure that this is the game I'm thinking of, because admittedly, because I know I definitely talked about it in our old podcast series. Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. This one is where you try to like solve the mystery while being in the mystery. And again, like I said, it's a puzzle game, but it's just not that interesting. So yeah, I do not agree with this being on the list, just because frankly there's just way better indie games. And also, I don't even know if this technically counts, since this was backed by Microsoft, so I don't even know if this technically counts. So yeah, do keep that in mind. So what would I have chosen to be the true nominees for this? Well, it's actually not going to look too different, except instead of Loop Hero in 12 minutes, oh, Kenna won that one, which, fair, valid. I would have replaced those with this game called Forgotten City. Keep in mind, this will be brought up in the future, but Forgotten City is actually a very technically impressive game. It's a full-fledged RPG that was originally a mod for Skyrim of all games. It released back in 2015 in the original form, but then in 2021 it got a standalone, complete overhaul standalone release using Unreal 4. So, and it's honestly, in that sense, and also I'm pretty sure it was only made like one or two guys, right? So, in that sense, I have to give credit where credit is due, and there's no way that I would be hard pressed not to have it in at least as a nomination, especially considering that we don't really get a lot of Roman themed games anymore anyways, so, or really just ever. So to see, a game that's sort of inspired by like the tales of Rome and just sort of that mythology, it's pretty cool to see. So in that respect, I full-heartedly think that this should have been a nominee. I don't know why it wasn't, but that's why we're here today. But of course, let's get into the ultimate question. Who is the winner of the Caspian Award for Best Indie Game for the Best Indie Game? So, also, if you guys hear any background noise, I apologize. I can't do anything about that. There's a freaking vent up there that we've tried closing off, but it just still makes noise, but whatever. Anyways, the best indie game of the Caspian Awards goes to... Yeah, I'm definitely going to need to get a new piece of paper for next time. Kenna, Bridge of Spirits. So, yeah, so to be fair, and give credit where credit is due, the Game Awards, the official Game Awards, actually got this one right. I think that this is one of the most visually stunning games just of that year. Like, again, just the fact that this game is an indie game. It's an indie game. It's not a AAA studio. This isn't Insomniac. This isn't like Nintendo. This isn't like anything like that. This is a pure indie, independent, independently published game. And it's so like beautiful. And also just the gameplay itself, again, because it is very inspired by a lot of, I'd say the best, like the games, I feel like the game that most encapsulates the inspiration for Kenna includes Pikmin with its sort of use of small characters. The combat, funny enough, it kind of feels like, I don't want to say Ratchet and Clank, which is funny because that game, there was a Ratchet and Clank game that came out that year. But I feel like, I guess another good comparison, I'd say the best comparison is probably something like Jak and Daxter in a way. But less of a platformer, if that makes sense. This is a pure action adventure game. So I guess sort of like that, or even like a Zelda Twilight Princess. I think that's the best comparison with this game as far as its controls. And truth be told, it's pretty fun in that regard. And again, it's sort of just a more humbled story about someone trying to, learn to become the best. And that's pretty cool. So that right there is, of course, our picks for the best indie game. So take it or leave it, because it's my opinion. I'm right. You're wrong. Okay, I'm not gonna be like that. If you disagree, that's fine. But this is my personal pick for best indie game of 2021. So, next up, best action adventure game. So again, this includes action games, adventure games, actions dash adventure games, platformer games, and then horror games. Though for one of the nominees, I'm gonna have to explain why I'm not gonna choose it for best action adventure, but I'm gonna choose it for a different category. Because admittedly, there's a lot of discrepancies when it comes to this category, at least. So do keep that in mind. So, what were the nominees given to the best action / adventure game for 2021? I will admit, not a bad list, but I just feel like several of them are just, this is just not the category for them. So let's talk about the games that if I'm gonna be honest, there's only one game that I would genuinely choose for best action adventure game, and that game would be Metroid Dread. As a sort of, the Metroidvania sort of thing, but like, as far as like platform action adventure games go, I totally agree. My one complaint about Metroid Dread is that visually it looks kind of dated. Like, I don't know. Like, am I the only one who just doesn't look like the look of Metroid Dread all that much? Like, there's just something about it that just is just kind of off. Which I guess you could make a counter argument that is the point of this. But I don't know, man. It just looks like the game is a lower resolution than it should be, if that makes sense. So that's my only complaint, though. As far as gameplay, that's still right there, especially with that thing that follows you around the entire game, similar to the other Metroid game. And considering that this is the first Metroid game in, I think, 14 years, and the first 2D Metroid game in over 20, or nearly 20 at least, like, especially since this was actually a canceled Metroid game at some point before it got revived. Definitely worth the wait, and is definitely worthy of being on here. This one, I do wholeheartedly agree, should be in the best action adventure category. So, as far as games that I actually do like being given a nominee, but I don't think really is warranted here, Resident Evil 8, or Resident Evil Village. I'm just going to call it Resident Evil 8. It's literally on the cover, so it's Resident Evil 8. That, and then also Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Those are two hella respectable choices as far as being nominated for just an award. Especially since I'd argue that those were definitely some of the best games that came out of 2021 easily. Resident Evil 8, of course, following up on what Resident Evil 7 did and expanding a lot of the elements that was there. And of course, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, continuing off of Into the Nexus back in from 2013. I know there was the 2016 remake that was in between, but like, this is the first proper sequel in 8 years. It's really awesome to see that they got the nod. But if I'm gonna be honest, I don't think this is the best category for them. Ratchet and Clank has a bit more water for this, but I would actually argue that, especially since I created the best shooter game category, they fit more with that. Because Resident Evil 8 is a first-person shooter, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, well, yes, it is a platformer and an action-adventure game, it's also a third-person shooter. And so, because of that, and also, admittedly, you're about to see, like, the shooter category for 2021 was absolutely garbage, like, in 2021. I'm just going to be frank about that. But yeah, like as far as shooter game, as far as like that, I would personally would rather nominate them for that. So, but then we've got Psychonauts 2. So, and this is where people are going to hella disagree with me on this one. So, if you don't want to hear it, this is your warning. This is coming from someone who did play the first game, by the way. I streamed it last year. But if you guys remember me streaming that game last year, I wasn't really the biggest fan of it. I know, like, go ahead and just, you can try to find me, but you're never gonna fucking kill me. But I'm sorry, I could not stand the backtracking. In like a lot of the forced leveling of the game, and that's a damn shame because like fucking everyone was saying you have to play Psychonauts. It's one of the best platformer games of the 2000s. And it's like, I like the concept. I like, Raz as a character. I like, Agent Sasha. Like there's a lot of cool things in Psychonauts. But man, I hated the fact that there were level caps in the game. That's what killed it for me. And because of that, I'm hesitant to really talk about having Psychonauts 2 as a nominee for me personally. I've not played it yet, so there's also that factoring into it. But like, I haven't played it yet. Maybe it's way better than the first game. I don't know. But what I do know is if it's anything like the original game, I'm sorry, but I kind of don't want to deal with that because I think that Psychonauts is just a little bit overrated. I'm kind of sorry.
What a shame.
I know, JC Denton, I know. So yeah, that's just kind of my personal thing. As for Guardians of the Galaxy, no. Hell no. I mean, I know a lot of people liked this game, but you guys already know I'm not a big Marvel fan to begin with. And frankly, I also specifically blame Guardians of the Galaxy as being one of the first things as far as like pushing the stupid like nostalgia like 80s wave that happened throughout the 2010s that absolutely drove me up the fucking wall. So yeah, no, I would not nominate this in a heartbeat. That being said though, okay, never mind. I was about to say, yeah, no, no, hell no. Especially since it's not even like in a like that original of a game, anyways. So, sorry, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that one. Like, I may not care about Psychonauts as much, but that's still a way better pick than fucking Guardians of the Galaxy. So, as far as what actually won, Metroid Dread was the original winner. But what would be my nominees? I am very shocked that Hitman 3 and Kenna were not at least considered. I'm genuinely serious. Kenna, again, I already gave Kenna the win as far as indie games go, but like, again, not even a nod for action adventure either. I don't know. That's just a bit weird to me. Like, is that a bit? That's that weird? I don't know. I just thought that was just a really off pick thing. So yeah. So yeah, hard disagree as far as it not being nominated. It should have been nominated. But what about Hitman 3? Now, you guys are probably confused now because, oh, but you removed Ratchet and Clank, and that's a third-person shooter. Hitman 3 also has third-person shooting in it. But here's the difference between Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart and Hitman 3. Yes, they both have third-person shooting elements in them, but the thing about Hitman is that, hear me out, I want you really close to the speakers for me, please. It's not the fucking goal for Hitman 3 to be a third-person shooter. It's a stealth game. I mean, if you have the ability for you to go guns a-blazing if you really want to, but you're playing the game wrong if you are. I usually don't like making that argument because it's a very pretentiously asshole thing to say. But this is one of the few times where I have to be like, yeah, no, if you try to play this game like a third-person shooter, like, you are playing the game wrong. Like, you're supposed to go in each mission without being detected, like, at all, and using alternative means to take out your targets. Whether it be, using, lethal poison, or knocking them off a ledge, or sort of tricking them into their own deaths, stuff like that. You're not supposed to play it like a traditional shooter. Whereas with Ratchet and Clank, you have to play it like a third-person shooter. With Hitman 3, you don't. That's the difference between Ratchet and Clank and Hitman 3 as far as like that goes. So, and also, yeah, I know there's the stupid DRM bullshit thing that like they put on Hitman 3, and there were a bit of issues that resulted from that. But not only have all those issues been ironed out, but also this game's really fucking amazing. Like the previous two games. Like, oh my god, this Hitman 3, it's so good, especially the locations. I mean, dude, you go to like some creepy ass mansion in the middle of like, the English countryside, for fuck's sake. Like, that's so cool. Like, kind of gives me like BO4 Dead of the Night vibes. But like in a good way. Like, yeah, no, like I'm actually genuinely shocked though that Hitman 3 did not get a single like mention at the Game Awards. Like, that right there is a big epic fail if I've ever seen one. Like, oh my god. I have no idea how the fuck this game was not nominated for anything at the Game Award. And I mean, it didn't even get like a nominee. It didn't even get like an honorable mention. Like, what the hell? So, absolute just what is up with the Game Awards and just snubbing games? Because again, we talked about last time that like they completely snubbed Skywalker Saga. They completely snubbed this game too. Like, what the fuck, Game Awards? So yeah, no, I'm giving this a nomination. And you know what? I'm also gonna give a nomination for Best Action Adventure, Chivalry 2. Like, yes, I know there was the thing that, there's, the whole Epic Games exclusive thing that was in that. Yes, that was fucking stupid. But taking that aside, this game is pretty freaking awesome. For those who don't know, Chivalry was originally was it an Unreal Engine mod? Okay, no. It was a game that was originally released back in 2012, where it was kind of like Mountain Blade, in the sense that you fought. It's a multiplayer medieval hack and slash game, and I'm just gonna say it. This game is an improved version of that, and honestly, I think that the first Chivalry game is already pretty underrated as hell. And so to see the sequel be as fun as it is, yeah, no, like this is easily this is easily I easily give this game the nod as far as action adventure games go. So, but what is the winner? That's the real question. Let's get into the winner of the one best action adventure game of 2021. The award goes to Hitman 3. Again, this game got hella snubbed. What the hell, Game Awards? Like, I know this game, I know this game came out, what is it, like, February or January? Like, this game came out very early 2021, but that doesn't matter. This game is amazing. It continued the amazing gameplay of the previous Hitman games that was following up to this one. Like I said, the locales are so amazing, like visually, but also just to your advantage. It's really awesome to play through, especially with the one mission where this is slight spoilers, but it's kind of tied within gameplay. You end up in a mission where you don't know your targets in Germany, but then you have to find you basically have to use the stuff in the map to try to figure out who your targets are, which some people got frustrated with that, but I think that is a very creative way for a Hitman game to implement the goals, because you don't know who you're going after in this, which usually for most of the Hitman games you already know who you're going after. So having that sort of change of juxtaposition makes that mission at least stand out in my mind, and I think it definitely worked out here. And, well, truth be told, this is the best way to play all of the World of Assassination trilogy maps, considering that this game has all the content from the previous two games in it. Well, of course, through the season pass stuff, and I'm pretty sure this game also had DLC, which isn't factoring into this, by the way. But the fact that this game has so much content in it, it's the definitive way to play Hitman. And especially with all the updates, here's my hot take. I think this is the best Hitman game that has ever been released. And as far as, content goes, this is the best bang for your buck as far as stuff. Like, this is the definitive Hitman game. And I hope that everyone goes out, like, if there's anything to take away, okay, well, there's a lot of things we'll have to take away from tonight, but, like, go play Hitman 3. Just go do it. And even if you don't want to play Hitman 3, because, your computer may not be powerful or all that stuff, go play the other two games. The only issue is the stupid DRM. There should not be an always online mode. I don't know why they do that. Hopefully, I'm pretty sure, I hope there's a patch for it, but whatever. Go play Hitman 3. That's what I'm going to say. So, and it should, not only does it deserve the win, but it also should have been nominated. Game Awards, stop snubbing your fucking games. Like, I swear to God. Again, if 2024 snubs any amazing games from this year, oh my God. Let's get into the best RPG. So, RPGs, role-playing games. So, we've talked about that in 2022. It was a pretty bad year for as far as role-playing games, if I'm just going to be frank. RPGs were pretty bad in 2022, outside of Elden Ring, of course. Thankfully, 2021 was fine. It was okay. Though this was the year of the JRPG, as a slight spoilers for what's to come up. But also, there's a bit of a game that's going to come up that was nominated for 2021, which it makes sense because, it was in the cutoff date it was outside of the cutoff date for 2020's list. Excuse me. Therefore, it wasn't nominated for 2020. But it should be pretty obvious what game I'm going to be talking about. But I'm just going to be straight up, no. But yeah. Goddamn. Oh fuck! I forgot to do the meme for this one. Oh, whatever. But yeah, let's take a. Yeah, everyone boo at Cyberpunk 2077 for, getting the nomination here. Like, boo. Why is this game on this list? No. Like, no. Shame on you, Cyberpunk 2077. Shame on you for actually making... Again, the fact that this game got a nomination, that just shows you everything. So, again, I feel like I complain about this game along with Battlefield 2042 a lot. I'll get to that game later. Specifically because they are the prime examples that I continue to use as far as games that had shit launches, yet people still defend them. Like, guys, I swear to God, I don't care if it's been 3.5 years since the game came out. It doesn't matter because the game launched like shit. Like, that is unacceptable. I shouldn't have to wait 2 years for a game to get good. Like, that should, because at that point, that basically means the game didn't launch in 2020. This game launched in 2022. I am actually starting to get really fucking sick and tired of motherfuckers defending games after the fact. Yeah, I will admit I do have games that are like that for me personally, but even then, I still am principled enough to say, yeah, no, this game should have launched like how it is right now. It shouldn't have launched like shit. So, I am getting sick and tired of games that are like this. And unfortunately, it's only become more and more common. So, specifically when it comes to the AAA and even AA scene. So yeah, no, point is, get your fucking launches right. Stop releasing games like dog shit. So, as far as the other games on this list are concerned, they're fine. Again, all these other games that are on this list are JRPGs, which makes sense because, JRPGs are pretty popular. Though, yeah, that was the weird thing, is that, every RPG I tried to find that was released in 2021, again, it's not a bad thing that they're JRPGs, it's just, that was the trend I saw. Monster Hunter Rise being a Capcom game, and then Scarlet Nexus. Yes, I know that cover doesn't really show it, but it's another JRPG. Tales of Arise with the Arise series. Wait, is it Tales? No, it's not Tales of. Whatever. What I do know is that game comes from a series that started since the mid-90s. And Shin Megami Tensei, that's definitely a series that's been around since the late 80s. So, yeah, as far as 2021 goes, it was fine. Again, most of these aren't bad nominees, except for fucking Cyberpunk. Thankfully, this is not another case of Hoodie-itis, and it was Tales of Arise that won. Thank God, by the way, because that would have been a terrible look for the Game Awards. I swear to God, if Cyberpunk was the one that won, not only would that be a bad look in the sense that they were just defending a game with a shit launch, but also it's a game made by a Western studio. And granted, it's not an American studio, so like I wouldn't have to complain about that. But like, for a bunch of Japanese RPG games to be made, and then a European game to be the one to win, I don't know. Like that would have been a really bad look. I'm just saying. So, but yeah, honestly though, I wouldn't. That would be the only thing I would change on this. And instead, I would replace Cyberpunk with Forgotten Kingdom. If you wanted to have a nominee for an RPG that was, a non-Japanese role-playing game that came out in 2021, Forgotten City easily would have been the better choice. I already explained exactly why it would have been the better choice, since there's a lot of depth, and since this was a very impressive game as far as like being made by like either one guy or just like a small group, it's hella impressive that this game even came out. So again, I know I'm not really talking about Scarlet Nexus, Tales of Arise, or Shin Megami Tensei 5 all that much, but that's partially because of just how fucking shit the Cyberpunk nominee was. Like, Jesus Christ. So, and also admittedly, if I'm gonna be honest, even I'm kind of a bit tentative about those picks. Mostly because like I'm not as familiar with their respective franchises. Or at least with Tales of Arise and Shin Megami. Scarlet Nexus I think is an original. But you get the point, is that it's kind of iffy, because again, 2021 when it comes to RPGs was kind of a middle of the road year. That being said, let's get into the winner. So, and by the way that I was talking, it should be pretty obvious what the winner is. So the award for the best role-playing game of 2021 goes to there we go, Monster Hunter Rise. This should come as no surprise. This shouldn't be a shock to those who saw the previous episode, as I gave Sunbreak the. Actually, I'm gonna spoil that. I'm not gonna spoil that. But anyways, so yeah, as far as RPGs go, I mean, yes, while I respect Forgotten City, Monster Hunter Rise is, in my opinion, the best choice. Tales of Arise, it's not a bad game. I respect for that game for what it is in its own lane, its own category. But again, like even if you wanted like my opinion on the best RPG, it's not even the best JRPG game on that list. In my opinion, Monster Hunter Rise does it way better. Especially since this game, yes, it followed up on Monster Hunter World, and while I will admit it's not as good as Monster Hunter World, it still added in a lot of cool new mechanics, especially when it comes to the crafting and the leveling up in the game. A lot of the new enemies look really damn cool and are pretty fun to fight. The locales are as good as they could. Like, they're cool. Like, I wouldn't say that they're like amazing, except of course what we talked about with the jungle biome for the Sunbreak expansion. And of course, but I think the best thing about this game is just the amount of progression that's in the game. This game has a very deep progression system. And that is something that I always will give credit where credit is due when it comes to Monster Hunter in general. Is that Monster Hunter, is one of those franchises that has always been good with incentivizing you to continuously go after higher and higher level monsters. So, at the end of the day, I think this is it's a bit of a safe choice, especially since Monster Hunter is a lot more of a recognized name. But I think that, like, especially when it comes to games that are a bit more familiar with people, I think this is the best choice, in my opinion. So, there's that. Alright, best shooter game. So, this is first and third person shooters. It obviously, we've already talked about Ratchet and Clank and Resident Evil. But guys, here's the problem, unfortunately. And this kind of goes into what I was talking about at the beginning of this. 2021, especially with the hindsight and the fact that it's been several years now, it was not a good year, like, at all. Especially in the first-person shooter category. I mean, for fuck's sake, we got Call of Duty Vanguard, Battlefield 2042, and Halo Infinite released in the span of a month. COD Vanguard was a blanded, uninspired, just, corporate shitfest. Battlefield 2042 didn't even fucking launch. Like, it didn't even fucking work at launch. And while, yes, people were kind of, warmed up with Halo Infinite at first, that honeymoon phase was quickly, and I mean quickly, over after, with all of just the slow updates that were being added to the game. And as I mean slow, I mean they literally had a roadmap where there were only 2 fucking maps being released in the first fucking year. Like, that's pretty bad. And also just the fact that progression was terrible in Halo Infinite. So, slight spoiler alert, but Halo Infinite, just out of principle, is not nominated for Best Shooter Game. So, I know people are going to be pissed off about that, and I feel bad because, like, I like the gameplay of Halo Infinite, but I cannot, in good faith, have it as a nominee for the Best Shooter Game. I just can't. And again, those are just the tips of the fucking iceberg when it comes to, worst shooter games of that year. Like, I can go on and on about just how, like, games like Outriders, an RPG third-person shooter game that, like, crashed every other time, that, like, every, like, 15 minutes, it didn't even work. What else was there? There was a lot of fucking just trash. No, shooters. Oh, and Deathloop, which, yeah, I just remembered Deathloop, which is one of the most forgettable and generic first-person shooters to ever released. I mean, I remember back in 2019 in our first E3 podcast episode that, like, when that trailer was initially, like, when that trailer was revealed, I instantly forgot about it. And I was someone who, like, because I was sort of trying to describe the game, but I didn't remember the fucking name. That should be pretty telling on just how bland Deathloop was, just conceptually. And don't even get me started on something like Back 4 Blood, which, frankly, shouldn't have been fucking released. Or even just the controversies with games like Lemnis Gate, and also just a lot of people's issues with Far Cry 6, the Crysis remaster that people were just kind of going on about. Like, yeah, 2021 was not a good year when it comes to first-person shooter, or, like, just shooter games in general. I'm just gonna be frank. It was a pretty bad year. So yeah, admittedly, thankfully, I was able to gather just enough for the best shooter game category. Though, you guys are going to have to hear me out on a couple of them. So I already spoiled it. Ratchet and Clank and Resident Evil 8 are nominated for this. As far as other games go, I have chosen Returnal, Hell Let Loose, and GTFO. So I think I need to explain myself with Hell Let Loose. So Hell Let Loose, for those who don't know, is a Battlefield-esque shooter, but it's more of a tactical shooter. So you die very quickly. I actually talked about this game whenever I was talking about my time in Vegas for TwitchCon, because that was one of the games that they allowed us to play on the PC setups that they had. I thought it was actually pretty fun. It's a hard as fuck game. I'm not going to deny that. But as far as shooter games from 2021 goes, because this was an early access game from 2019, but it officially released in 2021, therefore it counts here. But as far as like that goes, I know a lot of people had issues with a lot of the post-launch updates and all that fun stuff, but keep in mind we're talking about this game from 2021's release. It was a pretty damn good, like, as far as like, that goes, yeah, no, like, I can definitely see where people were coming from by saying that, yes, this game right here is a good shooter game. Especially in the, best multiplayer department. And it also helps for me personally because I actually really like World War II shooters. I know World War II shooters get a bad rep, especially considering that they were milked throughout the 2000s. But I still just kind of like the idea of recreating a lot of the battles that were fought in World War II and World War I, like, as well. I'll throw a bone to World War I in that regard as well. But I've always been more, as far as like military shooters go, I've always been more interested in either more modern military games or World War II / historical military games. I don't know. It's just for me, more futuristic or just straight up sci-fi military games outside of Halo, they just haven't really I just haven't really been all that engaged with those types of games. I guess Titanfall as well. It just, for me personally, I just prefer a more grounded, a more familiar setting when it comes to shooter games, personally. So yeah. Now, okay, Returnal. This one's kind of a weird one as well because this one's kind of a roguelike, but kind of not. Well, it's a third-person shooter, for those who don't know. I think this was the second Sony exclusive game. Demon's Souls Remake was the first PlayStation 5 exclusive game. I'm pretty sure this was the second, if I'm not mistaken. And again, it has a really cool sort of look. It has like an H.R. Geiger inspired environment. Like, you can tell it's hella inspired by Alien, but unlike Alien, you aren't really fighting something that looks like that. You're kind of fighting a lot of like tentacly looking creatures, which look gross, but they look really cool at the same time. And again, this is another game that's really fucking hard. But as far as those types of games go, this game I think definitely rises above a lot of other of that type. So that's just my opinion. And then we've got GTFO. Get the fuck out. Holy shit, this game is fun, but also really fucking hard. So, which I guess that's kind of a common pattern that you're seeing here, is that like there's a lot of shooter games that are good, but they're really hard. Which, that's the difference between me complaining about a game with difficulty issues, because these games are difficult, but they're still fun. As far as GTFO goes, for those who don't know, it is a It's not really an extraction shooter. It's more, it's another sort of cooperative. I guess you can call it a horde shooter, in air quotes, though. But yeah, like, I don't know. For me personally, this game is fun, though it's definitely a game that you have to play with other players. Otherwise, you're gonna have a hella bad time. Which is kind of the one thing that is a bit of a crutch for it. So I did play this. I actually played it, I think, back in November because there was a free, not demo, but there was like a free weekend for GTFO. I had fun, but whenever I tried playing with bots, oh my god, it was way too fucking hard. Even with AI bots. So yeah, that's kind of my one asterisk with GTFO is that it's fun, but you gotta have at least like a few friends with it. So that's my piece of advice. But let's get into the winner. Who's the winner of this? Well, if it wasn't obvious, at least for me personally, the award for best shooter game of 2021 goes to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. So this one's also kind of funny because we finally reached a game. Hold on. We finally reached a game that I physically own. It took us 3 episodes in to finally have talked about a game that I actually have on my shelf. Which is kind of sad, but at the end of the day, I'm happy with this. And again, you can argue. I will definitely say that you can definitely make a good case that this isn't the best choice, and that something like Resident Evil 8 would have been a better choice, or Returnal would have been a better choice. I would definitely agree with you, but in my opinion, this is the perfect blend. Like, in my opinion, this is the best game to represent the general shooter category. Because again, keep in mind, the shooter category is not just first-person shooters. It's third-person shooters as well. And the solid blend of third-person shooter and platforming action works wonders with this game. I mean, I don't know if I've been vocal about this too much, but yes, Ratchet and Clank is associated with being a platformer. But I honestly kind of see it. Yes, I do agree that, like, there's a lot of platforming elements. But if I'm going to be honest, I've always kind of gravitated Ratchet and Clank more towards the third-person shooter category, as far as its gameplay goes. At least when it comes to the OG PS2 games. The newer games, yeah, like, it is a platformer, but like not in the same ways as something like a Crash Bandicoot or Mario or Spyro. You know what I mean? Like, it's a bit more light on its platforming, if you catch my drift. Regardless, though, it's still a solid blend of those two styles of gameplay. It's also a beautiful looking game. Like, oh my god, this game, I know that's been a bit of a common theme I've been saying, but like, seriously, like, this, as well as Kina, and I'll even throw Psychonauts 2 a bit of a bone on this, but all 3 of those games are very visually stunning games. And I have to give credit where credit is due with the art team for all these games. And also the solid voice acting with the characters in this game is pretty nice. Because I remember a few of the calls that I've been with Saimori where we honestly just straight up just watch the cutscenes for this game. Because, I mean, there's some bits that are funny, but also because it's just so just amazing. Like, honestly, it looks like what it could have been like a television series, which is funny because they did come out with a movie. Unfortunately, that movie was fucking not very good. The movie was a very
It's not good.
yeah. But I still think that like it was like it as far okay, not the movie. The movie's terrible. As far as like, you know, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart goes, yeah, it's so yeah. And last point, this game is, in my opinion, the first example of a next-gen game. The fact that you go between different portal dimensions simultaneously is a showcasing of the innovations that these consoles are able to do. The like 9th-gen consoles, I'm patting on my PS5, by the way, like, they're not just glorified 8th-gen consoles. This is proof, at least in my eyes, that they have a bit more power to them. And this, in my opinion, is the first game that was finally able to showcase that we're no longer in the previous generation. We're in the 9th gen, bitch. Let's go. And I'm all for it. So, congratulations, Ratchet and Clank. You did pretty damn well. You know what? Just because of that just because you also showcased the capabilities of the next gen, I'm gonna give you another audience. You genuinely do deserve it. So, and of course, I'm being biased because I grew up with the older Ratchet and Clank games, and I've streamed all the PS2 like era games. But still, like this, it deserves the recognition. So, especially in a year that was fucking terrible when it comes to shooter games. Which, speaking of, like, you know, years that was terrible for another genre, simulation and strategy games. This was also a pretty bad year when it comes to simulation and strategy games. Like, probably worse than shooter games, if I'm just gonna be straight up honest with you guys. Like, holy shit, this year, like 2021 was really bad when it came to sim/strategy games. Like, either you got a lot of just sort of generic insert blank simulator games that came out this year, or you just had a lot of strategy games or simulation games in general that a lot of people just did not vibe with. Some of which I am gonna have to disagree with, but yeah. And unfortunately, to be fair, a lot of it is that, like, the Game Awards could not avoid it. This was just a terrible, terrible year for this particular category. So much so, I honestly was considering not having this on for this entire thing. Like, or for this episode, if I'm going to be honest. Like, it was that bad. But thankfully, I was able to find just a couple. But let's get into what the Game Awards actually nominated as far as sim and strategy games. We already have problems. Okay. Here's my first problem. Why the fuck is Microsoft Flight Simulator on here? Again, I know that this was a terrible year when it came to sim and strategy games. I know there was no way in avoiding, like, it was kind of hard for you guys to choose. Hell, it was really hard for me to choose. Literally, 10 minutes before I started streaming, I was trying to find games. But there's a bit of a problem with this. This game was nominated for 2020 as well. Okay, to be fair, I know why this was on the list. It's because the console release for Microsoft's Flight Simulator was released in 2021. But here's the problem. It was already released on PC in 2020, so why the fuck is this being done? Again, I've never seen this before, by the way. I've never seen it to where an award show nominated something for the same exact category in 2 years in a row. Outside of the best esports thing, but we ignore that because they're stupid over there. But yeah, this was just so weird seeing. Like, I actually hated seeing this here. So, yeah, I'm not saying that it's a bad game, by the way. I think Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is actually a very technologically impressive game in a lot of ways. I think it's actually, slight spoiler for 2020, I think it's actually a fair choice for best sim best sim slash strategy game for 2020, but not 2021, because it didn't come out in 2021. Only its console ports did. So, hard disagree right there. Then we got Humankind, which is a Civilization-inspired game, except there's a lot more involving diplomacy in this, from what I can tell. It's a lot more just sort of micro scale as opposed to macro with the Civilization games. Granted, I did not want to bring this up, but I was talking to Goldie the other night, and I have to bring this up. Like, a lot of people had issues with this game, but unfortunately for very dumb reasons. But you know what? Fuck it, I'm gonna bring it up. A lot of people didn't like this game, unfortunately, for the stupid reason that they were calling it WOKE. While I'm not nominating this game personally, I'm not doing it for those reasons. It honestly, it's kind of why I've started to, like, honestly, I didn't want to bring this up last night, or not last night, like last time, but if I'm going to be honest, I still think that like 2021 and 2022 people were jaded because of the pandemic, and because of that, every single piece of like small minute issues with a game, people just mass review bombed games just based off of like tiny issues. But if I'm going to be honest, I think part of the reason why the review scores on sites like Metacritic are low as well is because people were making a bunch of those dumbass arguments on certain games like this. Same thing with Bayonetta 3 from last time. And I'm just going to be frank with you guys. If you are someone who unironically hates the game because, the cover of the game has a woman on it who looks like she's like, in the French Revolution or something, or that there's like an African American guy, or just like, someone who's like, with a darker skin tone on the cover, I'm just gonna be frank. I'm just gonna be frank. You're just a fucking racist idiot. I'm just gonna be blunt. You're just a fucking racist idiot, and I'm not gonna fucking tolerate that on my fucking. I'm not gonna tolerate that with anyone who watches me. If you are someone who does genuinely like, call anything quote unquote woke or anything as like, left propaganda, then you're not welcome here. You're just a fucking bigot, and you're a piece of shit, and you're most likely a racist or a sexist or a homophobe. So, get the fuck out. So, this is me being fucking serious, by the way. So, I only bring that shit up. I didn't want to bring that shit up, but after actually reading a bunch of the reviews for games like Humankind, and even going back to a lot of the games that I already talked about with last time, Bayonetta 3, God of War Ragnarok, even games that I didn't even like, but I saw got review bombed, like Horizon Forbidden West. Yeah, no, it was filled with a bunch of comments of like idiotic shit like that. And so because of that, I am no longer that is honestly partially why we're no longer judging adding games based off of Metacritic scores, because unfortunately those idiots affect the score, and because of that I can no longer trust the user scores on any website. So that being said, I'm not someone who's completely keen on critic reviews, but if there's going to be a bunch of user reviews that is going to spew out actual literal fucking racist or homophobic shit, then like I'm not going to fucking bother. So no thanks. That being said, as far as Humankind goes for me personally, it's not really my thing personally. It has its problems as well as far as a grand strategy game goes, and so for that reason, it's not going to be nominated here. And then we got Evil Genius 2, which I'm not going to lie, I like the aesthetics of the game, and I like the look, and I like the type of gameplay it is, because it's a management simulator where you're running your own evil like laboratory. This is the sequel from a game from 2005, kind of like with Psychonauts 2 for Psychonauts 1. It looks cool, but the problem is that neither critics or users really liked it, and I made sure it wasn't because of any bullshit reasons. Thankfully, for as far as Evil Genius 2 is concerned, people did have actual genuine criticisms of the game, and they did think it sucked. And so because of that, I will admit it is kind of a guilty pleasure because I like the look of it, but man, I can't in good faith nominate it. So yeah. Especially since I haven't even played the damn game anyways. Whatever. So yeah, that ultimately leads us with Inscription, which valid, that game deserves to be on here. It's a card game, and it's a dungeon crawler, but card games, that counts. You're simulating a card game, so it counts. And well, you have to strategically defeat your opponent, so it's a strategy game, so counts there. And then we got Age of Empires 4, which valid. I mean, yeah, post-launch was a bit of rocky from what I can tell, but like other than that, from what I played with the free weekends that I actually got to play with as well, this is completely valid. This is a completely valid spot for it. And yeah, no, I agree. This should be a nominee. And I'm pretty sure, yes, it was the winner. So, what were the games I ended up choosing? Obviously, Inscription and Age of Empires, I chose. But this one's kind of an interesting one. So, okay, I know. We've had a lot of Warhammer games being nominated. Honestly, that is not on purpose. These are genuinely the games that I saw pretty high review scores on. And you know how much I like Warhammer in Warhammer 40k. Actually, funny enough, earlier today, I just remembered I put this on the bed. I just literally earlier today, I just got myself a whole box of Demonettes. So that should be telling just how much I'm really into Warhammer. So there's a bit of a bias there, I will admit, but I'm being serious when I say this. I'm genuinely trying not to nominate Warhammer 40k all the fucking time. It's the same reason as to why I haven't nominated a Call of Duty thing, related thing, quite yet. It's because it's a franchise that just has so many releases that it's just it would feel disingenuous if it was flooding these lists. So I'm trying not to have as many 40k games. And slight spoiler for 2020, there won't be any 40k games or Warhammer games in general being nominated. So don't get your, don't worry. That being said, Battle Sector, it's sort of a this one's weird because this one's a turn-based strategy game that is kind of a weird one. It's as if XCOM and Civilization mixed, but minus the diplomacy and just focusing on the actual table battles. It's interesting. It's weird, but it's interesting. Granted, it doesn't have any of the factions that I prefer playing in 40k, but that's fine. So, but like, it was interesting enough. So, and it got decent enough reviews. So at the end of the day, I feel a bit more comfortable putting on this here. But again, rest assured, it's not going to be, this is going to be the last 40k game in a while. 40k will be put on timeout, or Warhammer in general. And then this is another one that actually is kind of one, if I'm going to be honest, I just said, fuck it. Forza Horizon 5. Just straight up, again, this is pretty much telling on just how bad 2021 was for simulation games. If it gets to the point where I just have to throw my hands and just say, fuck it, you're simulating a racing game, therefore it counts, you know that this year was really bad. So, and that's exactly what happened. I just had to fucking throw my hands and be like, fuck it. You're getting nominated, especially considering that it would have felt weird to not at least mention Forza Horizon 5, especially since I heard a lot of good things about it, but also because well, yeah, just because it was just a game that like a lot of people really liked, and also we haven't had a lot of racing or just sports games in general on the show quite yet. So don't worry, there'll be more of them in the future. It's just, yeah. But yeah, as far as like that goes, Forza Horizon 5 is getting a nod. But let's go over the winner. So again, this is probably going to be another obvious one for those who are familiar with the channel, but you know, the award for the best sim/strategy game goes to Age of Empires 4. So, pretty obvious because I've been pretty vocal about how much I love RTS games. I know I don't stream them as often, but that's mostly because RTS games aren't really that popular in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah. But, frankly, this is an awesome return of a franchise that was basically dead for like 15 years. Because again, this is another sequel to a game where the last game was from 2005. That's just the magic year for whatever reason. 2005 was just the final nail in the coffin for a lot of like game series for whatever reason, until it wasn't. But as far as this, like, it's a very welcome return to a classic RTS series. A lot of the modern amenities are welcome as well, especially when it comes to them changing it from single man units to a full-fledged unit thing. Because for those who don't know, Age of Empires, unlike a lot of other RTS games, for whatever reason, for whatever reason, even as late as Age of Empires 3, every unit just consisted of one person, which was kind of awkward to control. So they finally made it to where you got to actually control full-on squads, in case, again, this is a game that takes place in the Middle Ages, but whatever. You got to be able to control multiple groups of people, and there's also a lot of stuff that was added in from a bunch of other classic RTS games, such as Dawn of War and Warcraft and Starcraft and Supreme Commander and all that fun stuff. And that was pretty awesome to see. Like, this honestly is one of the best RTS games in a long time. Granted, RTS games kind of, like, there weren't really a lot that were being made in the 2010s. Like, it was just kind of a genre that kind of died after StarCraft 2 came out. Like, that was kind of the last big RTS game that came out, and since then there hasn't really been a lot of big ones, which is a shame because I actually really love RTS games. But rest assured, Age of Empires 4 proves that the RTS is still a relevant game genre, and I am very happy for it. So again, there are some like weird post-launch things that happen and controversies that happen with this game, but at the end of the day, this is still a solid game just on its own. And I have to give credit where credit is due with the team that worked on this, which actually, what studio worked on it? Was it? It wasn't Creative Assembly. It couldn't have been because they. Oh, it was okay. I think it was Relic, right? It was Relic Entertainment, which makes sense with like some of the stuff that was brought in from like Company Heroes because Relic made RTS games. Not Age of Wonders. That's a completely different series. Why is this being dumb? God damn it. Okay. Age of Empires 4. Yes, it was made by Relic. Okay. That's what I thought. Good job, Relic. You made a really awesome RTS in the modern day. Especially since Company Heroes 3 was a fucking mess when that came out. So that's a bit of a shame. But we can ignore that because we're going into multiplayer. So this was a pretty dicey category last time with 2022, where spoiler alert for those who have not seen it, I completely changed every single game that was on that list because I fundamentally disagreed with everything that the Game Awards nominated as the best multiplayer game for 2022. Like, I just hated that. If I'm going to be honest, it's kind of the same situation here, where most of the picks I am not a big fan of.
What a shame.
Yeah. So, let's get into those picks. So what did the Game Awards nominate for best multiplayer games for 2021? Three of these shouldn't even be on here. One of them is an early access game. So, like, okay. Let's talk about the games that obviously should not be on here. Knockout City, New World, and Back 4 Blood. Hell fucking no. Just straight up, fuck no. Knockout City was literally... Oh, shoot. Wait, what happened there? What the fuck? Hold on. Shoot, hold on. Let me look at this because that was concerning. These will be edited out once I re-upload these. Shoot, that actually was concerning. Oh my god, fucking okay, whatever. Okay. But yeah, let's talk about the games that shouldn't even be on here. Knockout City was a game that was published by EA that was just a game that was calculated and stupid. No one in their right mind would have wanted to play virtual dodgeball. Like, no one at all. And this game flopped heavily. This was a massive fucking flop when this came out. I have no idea. Like, again, this was just a bad idea from the get-go. And the fact that they greenlit it and it got released, and then it got panned, and it flopped, is very telling. So how the fuck did the Game Awards choose this as the best multiplayer game? I will never know. Back 4 Blood is another example of a game that, okay, it was actually, a lot of people were hyped for Back 4 Blood, especially since it was made by Turtle Rock, the same people who worked on the original Left 4 Dead. Problem is that they also worked on Evolve, which, that's a red flag right there, because Evolve is literally one of the worst examples of a live service to ever come out, and it was a massive failure because of it, and the game shut down like 2-3 years after it was released, back in 2017, I believe. So that should have been, in my opinion, that should have been the red flag for a lot of people, is that this is a case where it was in fact lightning in a bottle for Turtle Rock when it came to Left 4 Dead, because they made Left 4 Dead, it was wildly successful. Valve worked on the sequel. It wasn't Turtle Rock who did that. But then they worked on Evolve, massive disappointment for a lot of people, and then of course they came out with Back 4 Blood, which was also a massive disappointment for a lot of people. Weak progression. The fact that you could not change the difficulty, which how do you fuck that up? How do you fuck that up? Because when this game came out, you could not change between difficulties. You had to play every single mission with the difficulty that you chose. That is a fundamental flaw in your game. I have no idea how that got past testing. Oh my god, you fucked up hard with that. Not to mention, weapons feeling like you were shooting Nerf pellets, especially against enemies that were basically just bullet sponges. It was just not a fun time. And also the balancing was terrible with Back 4 Blood. Where easy mode was too easy, and then somehow normal mode was way too hard. May all the gods help people who were on the highest difficulty and stuck on that difficulty too. So hard fucking no for that one. And as for New World, I like the concept of New World. I think it's a very interesting idea. And also, this is actually technically like Amazon Game Studios' third game. But here's the problem with New World. It's a cool concept because it's very inspired by the early modern age in human history. Basically, the 1530s to about the 1710s, roughly. That's what is called the early modern period. For those who didn't know, or not really, a bit after that, French Indian War. What? I'm not giving you a history lesson. Basically, it's a game that's heavily inspired by the 17th century, and again, it has a very cool, unique aesthetic, and it actually takes cues, funny enough, from Monster Hunter in its sort of gameplay style. The problem is this game was massively pay to win. Massively. To the point where it was starting to lose sales, because this was not a subscription-based MMORPG. This was a you pay up front type of MMORPG. Amazon was not making enough money, and this resulted in them sponsoring a ton of Twitch streamers to try to play this game to help promote it. Hell, a bunch of Twitch streamers got paid to play this game. So, and there's still people who shill for this game to this day just because they got paid for it. So that's the exact reason why they still shill for it. It's because they got paid. It's not because the game itself is actually good. So thankfully, I didn't fall for that fucking bullshit. I couldn't have anyways, because my computer is definitely not powerful enough to run New World. But damn. So yeah, no, for those 3 games and for those reasons alone, I cannot in good faith nominate them for best multiplayer. There's no way a chance you can convince me otherwise. As for the other games, Valheim, it's a survival game and it looks really cool. Granted, it has a lot of similarities to Northgard, which is confusing, because they're both Viking survival games. But I do respect it. But there's one problem. Well, I already mentioned it at the beginning of the stream. It's an early access game, and so because of that, it does not qualify. Once it gets released for 2024, it will qualify for this year's release, but for 2021's list, no. And then we got It Takes Two. This is going to be one that a lot of people are going to be upset with me for. So, I respect It Takes Two. This is not, by the way, this is not me shitting on the game like I did with Baldur's Gate 3. It's not anything like that. As a matter of fact, I have way more respect for It Takes Two than I do with Baldur's Gate 3, but more because of its IP. It Takes Two has talented people who worked on it. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure the people who worked on this worked on No Way Out, which I played with one of my friends after they played through it with Saimori, after they played through it with our friend Zombie Slayer. They played through No Way Out, or was it A Way Out? No, whatever. It's by the same studio. And it plays very similarly to that, except it's a bit more child-friendly compared to that game. But this is just not really the aesthetics that I'm personally into. Because again, I'm someone who's all about aesthetics for a game, and I've mentioned this plenty of times before. I am not someone who prefers a lot of cartoony games, outside of a few exceptions. Games like this just aren't really my thing. I do respect it though, but I would not personally nominate it. So this one is more so just a respectful disagree, just for my personal takes, which only leaves Monster Hunter Rise being the only game that I would actually agree with. That is pretty sad. Like, that's depressing. So, what are my nominees? Well, frankly, it's games that we've talked about literally throughout this entire thing. It Takes Two on this, by the way, which I respect, but I disagree. So, yeah, it's mostly games we talked about earlier, with a new one, which I could have argued for it being on the best shooter category as well, but I just felt like this would have been a better category for it. So, okay. So yeah, Monster Hunter Rise, like I said, GTFO and Hell Let Loose, and Chivalry for the same reasons as I mentioned earlier. Hell Let Loose being, a really immersive World War II tactical shooter. GTFO for it being the proper Left 4 Dead style of game, that quasi Left 4 Dead style of game that should have been on here. And then Chivalry 2 for its hack and slash first person action combat. And then we got Aliens Fireteam Elite, which is also another Left 4 Dead style of game, except in the third-person perspective, and, well, you're fighting a bunch of xenomorphs from the Alien universe. So this one's kind of like the other Alien game I mentioned in 2023, for that sort of thing, where it's like, this game is actually a decent Aliens game. This is basically this game is what Aliens Colonial Marines should have been to begin with. I have no idea what the fuck they were thinking with that piece of shit that they released. So to see a game actually do what that game was supposed to do is awesome. So, and this game also adds a lot of, progression to, it has a lot of progression, a lot of, expanded lore to the Alien franchise. And just fundamentally, it's a game that I do think that is kind of underrated. It got swept under the rug because just shooter games in general were just kind of iffy this year, and that's a damn shame. So yeah. Sorry, I'm just gonna get a Kleenex because my nose is getting runny. But you get the point. Is for as far as like Left 4 Dead style of games go, this one's a pretty underrated one, and I do think that you guys can definitely check it out for yourselves. So that's kind of how I feel. But ultimately, let's choose the best multiplayer game. And the award goes to Monster Hunter Rise. So I'm not going to go over this one too much because my reasons are going to be the same exact like I said for the RPG category. But with the added idea of this being a pretty decent way to play in a co-op game. Again, it's not as good as Monster Hunter World, but it still fills that same gap, especially since I know this game was released on Switch. So I'm not too sure if Monster Hunter World was. If it was, feel free to let me know. But regardless, there is enough content for an entire group, like an entire party, to be able to play in this game. And that is something that is worth noting. So at the end of the day, I think that although if you could convince me GTFO could be the good, could be a good runner-up. So yeah, like at the end of the day, I think that Monster Hunter Rise, especially with just how much content there is in the game, I think this is just the better choice overall. All right, best DLC/expansion. So this is where we get to talk about the added content of a lot of the games that came out in previous years. So unfortunately, though, 2021 was also another terrible year as far as DLC. Again, 2021 was just straight up a bad year. Like, I could not, for the love of me, find anything that I just felt right for me to add as far as, like, content on here. So, but I was able to find 4, thankfully. The problem is that once you see the other options, you guys are gonna know exactly what's gonna win. Yeah. There's an obvious winner in this one. So let's go over the DLC. So Ghost of Tsushima, it had the Iki Island expansion, which added the Iki Island. So, continue the story of that as well as just the general gameplay. And to be fair, credit where credit is due with Sucker Punch. Obviously, I'm biased because Sucker Punch beats Sly Cooper and I love Sly Cooper. It was pretty cool to explore that entire, island. And it was a good excuse to be able to go back and play Ghosts of Tsushima, especially since, that's easily one of the best games of 2020. So, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then, okay, but this is how you know I got desperate. Remember when I mentioned earlier when I were in the Sim strategy thing where it's like I haven't nominated a Call of Duty game related thing quite yet? Well, this is where unfortunately that rule has to break. But thankfully it's for good reason. Mauer der Toten, the zombies map that was released for Cold War, the third wave-based zombies map. This map is fucking awesome to play. I took it for granted in our original tier list, but I've really grown to appreciate Mauer der Toten. It's one of the coolest zombies maps to release. And unfortunately, might be the last good wave-based zombies map that we'll probably ever have, especially since this map is almost 3 years old already. Fuck. And what came out since? Call of Duty Vanguard Zombies, which is a fucking shell of its... Like, it's basically just shitty Outbreak from Cold War. And then Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, which is also just basically Outbreak. And it's like, okay, Outbreak is fine if you play with friends, but you can't replace classic wave-based zombies. Like, it's because, like, not everyone wants to play that. And it was fine when you did it in Cold War. Repeat the same process in the other games. I don't know why they like, they don't have round-based. That's what most people associate zombies with. It's with the round-based maps. So, I mean, thankfully, Mauer Toten is still a shining example of that sort of, you know, new wave of Call of Duty where round-based can still work. I know Forsaken came out afterwards. Problem is Forsaken's kind of an iffy map. I don't hate Forsaken. It's just weaker compared to Mauer Toten. So, I guess the only problem is that this is only one map. So, yeah, not really. So, yeah, again, that's how you know I was desperate. And then we got the Ancient Gods Part 2 for Doom Eternal, where it continued on with the storyline of Doom Guy going deeper into the realms of hell, and, you know, the realms of hell being hella, well, pun intended, you know, heavily expanded upon, which is pretty awesome to see. Though, yeah, that ending, a lot of people are there's still people who are just very not keen of the ending of Part 2. But I find it as a pretty cool metaphor, personally. So, no spoilers, by the way. And then we got Hearts of Iron 4 with the No Step Back expansion. So, Hearts of Iron 4, of course, being the grand strategy game, like World War II grand strategy game, World War II / early Cold War grand strategy game, where this basically added in new faction tree focus, like basically tech trees to a lot of Eastern European countries, as well as a completely overhauled tech tree for the Soviet Union. So this one was kind of an update / expansion. It updated the Russian tech tree while giving more tech trees to countries like Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and yeah, just a bunch of the other Eastern European countries. I know those aren't Eastern European, but they were like over in the Soviet Union territories, so you know. So yeah, like I think that was pretty cool content added. But again, it's Hearts of Iron 4. There's only so much you can do. So let's just fucking get this over with, because we all know which one's gonna win. The fucking winner for this should be pretty obvious. It's Doom Eternal, Ancient Gods Part 2. Again, this is how you know 2021 was a pretty bad year, when, like, even the nominations, even I have to be like, yeah, I think this is cool, this is fine. It's no fucking Ancient Gods Part 2. There's no fucking way. I mean, obviously, you know, the length of these areas as well as the new content was definitely worth it, especially considering that this came out over a year after Doom Eternal came out, as well as with Ancient Gods Part 1. It is a very challenging experience, but it's rewarding nonetheless. And that boss fight, that last boss fight, damn, hard as hell, but still fun. And then, of course, yes, like I said, the ending of this part of the game was very controversial for a lot of people, and I understand a lot of people's frustration with it, but at the same time, I don't see it as a cop out. I see it more as just like a metaphor of Doom Guy's role within the Doom universe. So, at least that's kind of how I see it. It's kind of like how a lot of people fucking hated the ending of BioShock Infinite, but they kind of missed the point on what that ending is supposed to be about. It's not a cop out. It's just more just kind of a more not really a more just kind of more of a precautionary tale about the dangers of cycles. That's all I'm gonna say about Ancient Gods Part 2. So, but check it out for yourselves. Alright, remakes and remasters. Oh boy. So, this year was also, I'd say, a pretty decent year. Well, okay, it was decent. Okay, no, it wasn't decent. I mean, it was more middle of the road. Because there were some great remasters that came out. There were also some terrible ones that came out this year. Definitive edition. So, yeah, but I was able to choose quite a few remasters. Unfortunately, no remakes, but a few remasters that I was able to figure out. So, first up, we've got Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which, of course, is a remaster of the first 3 Mass Effect games. And, kind of doing a lot of quality of life improvements on just the games overall. And I will say, this is a very solid pick. This is this Mass Effect remaster collection is so, this is definitely, in my opinion, the best ways to experience the Mass Effect games. Granted, I'm not as familiar with them as a whole, but I mean, if you've seen on my shelf, if you've seen on the shelf, right next to, oh shoot, I don't have it anymore. Damn, where did I put it? Oh, it's over here, I think. Right? Is this it? No, that's not it. God damn it, what do I do to these games? Oh, it's outside. Okay. Sorry, I just remembered. I actually, for the longest time, owned the original Mass Effect, but physically on PC. Problem is that I didn't learn until recently that we didn't even have all the discs, so even if I wanted to play it, I couldn't. So... But yeah, as far as getting into Mass Effect, this is definitely one of the best ways you can get into it. So that's pretty awesome. And of course, there was the Alan Wake remaster. So this was also another sort of welcome thing, especially considering that Alan Wake 2 was a pretty awesome game, and we talked about it a lot in 2023's Game Awards. And this was basically them kind of building up the hype for that in the form of a remaster. So that's pretty nice. And then we've got the Quake remaster, which you guys know how much I fucking love Quake. It's one of my favorite games of all time. So, of course, I would be hard-pressed to not talk about Quake 1's remaster. And also, of course, it adding in the new expansion. I know there was the Dimensions of the Past. Oh yeah, it was the Dimension of the Machines. That was the expansion that was added alongside the remaster, which is pretty awesome. Even though I do prefer the original look of Quake, specifically the GL Quake version, where it had all the smooth animations and not as rough textures, I will admit that the remaster look of Quake does look really cool. And I do think that as far as revitalizing the shooter classic, yeah, this warrants this. And of course, we got Total War Rome remastered, which, again, this is honestly, a fantastic way to play Total War Rome. Personally, I would have preferred if it was a Medieval 2 remaster, but that's just me personally. But yeah, no, the original game was really good. It was admittedly kind of starting to show its age, though. So to see them go back to that game and just kind of, update the engine, allow for basically all of the content for the game to also be able to be readily available was pretty nice as well. And this was just a good polish of a game. And this is okay. Funny enough, I did actually technically pre-order this, but I got a discount because I already owned the original Total War Rome. So I only bought this game, I think, for only like $15. Definitely worth the price, and I recommend you guys check out Total War Rome Remastered. It is easily one of the best remasters, honestly, of all time, I would argue. But let's see what's the actual winner. Shoot, the freaking dropped this. So, the award for the best remake of 2021 goes to Mass Effect Legendary Edition. So yeah, even though I'm much more of a Total War fan, and you might be shocked that I didn't choose the Total War Rome remaster, I do have to admit the Mass Effect Legendary Edition remasters of the 3 games, I have to be like, yeah, this is definitely, like, not only is it just way more content as a whole, since these are full-fledged RPGs, but also this is a legendary, just series as a whole. Hence Legendary Edition, no pun intended. But this is just a franchise that has stuck with a lot of people, and again, the game itself is these remasters. They are definitely very beautiful in terms of just their upscaling and texture improvements, as well as just the general quality of life improvements, especially with Mass Effect 1, which in a lot of ways has kind of aged it has aged in several ways. So a lot of those quality of life improvements are always welcome. Excuse me. And of course, like I said earlier, this is definitely the best way to get into the Mass Effect trilogy. No ifs and or buts about it, especially since this includes all of the DLC, if I'm not mistaken. Unfortunately, the one caveat, unfortunately, though, is that I don't think it includes the multiplayer. So that is a bit of an asterisk. So thankfully, they do have Mass Effects 2 and 3 originals still on Steam, if I'm not mistaken. So if you want to be able to play the multiplayers, then you can do it over there. You'll probably have to use some sort of third party thing, because I'm pretty sure they shut down the servers. So all right, art direction. So visual style, visual quality, visual appeal. This is the most subjective part of the stream, so do keep that in mind. But what did the Game Awards think was the best art direction for a game? Let's go over that. I mean, Kena and Ratchet and Clank, I already gave props to them. I don't need to elaborate anymore. Need I say more? Psychonauts 2, even though that is not a game that I am personally into, mostly because I did not like the Psychonauts. Sorry, even though I personally did not like Psychonauts 1, and because of that, I'm kind of hesitant to play Psychonauts 2. I will stand by that the game is visually impressive, especially with that Tim Burton-esque animation-inspired look. That is something that I've always stood by, is that the look and just sort of the art direction of Psychonauts was always weird but interesting. So, and that of course continued on with Psychonauts 2. So that's pretty awesome to see. Then we've got The Artful Escape, which, I mean, it's a very colorful game, and there's some cool sections. I just don't really care for these types of games, because this is more of a narrative-driven sort of adventure game, kind of like Night in the Woods. And I never really jived with those types of games. I don't like smaller scale games. I need my action in my games. Nothing against those types of games, by the way. If that's your style, more power to you. I just find them very boring, personally. So, yeah. That's just me. Why the fuck is Deathloop on here? Like, seriously, this game is... Again, I know I'm shitting on Deathloop. It's not the worst game in the world, but it shouldn't be on here. Again, I already mentioned earlier, though, this game teaser trailer left zero impression on me whenever I first talked about it back in 2019. So, like, that is very telling just how bland this game is. And it's just so... I don't want to say milquetoast. It's just... It's a very Bethesda shooter, if you know what I mean. Like, and that sucks, because this was made by the same people who made Dishonored, and the Dishonored games are so cool. And the worst part, this is an example of Hoodie-itis right here. This game fucking won. This is the worst option! Like, okay, Kina and Ratchet & Clank, they're right fucking there. Like, what the fuck, Game Awards? Okay, like I said, even though I don't care for Psychonauts 2 or Artful Escape, those are better fucking options than fucking Deathloop. Like, really? Yeah, massive fucking L on this one. This is fucking terrible. Hoodie-itis strikes again tonight. Holy shit. Like, again, it's shit like this that make me absolutely annoyed with the Game Awards. Because it's like, dude, you're choosing the worst choice out of all of these. So, yeah, no, fuck that. As far as, like, the choices go, here's what I ended up choosing. So, Kina and Ratchet & Clank, I chose. I also chose Inscription, because, again, this game has a very, very, very cool and unique sort of presentation with its game. Again, this sort of dingy, horror, woodsy look is the thing that most people associate with this game, but it's not the only style that it goes for. Like, it goes for other styles as well, and it does those other styles equally as well. So, Inscription is, like, okay, I know it's not entirely, like, my personal cup of tea, but, like, this game is visually really fucking cool. So, I think it definitely, it easily should have been nominated. And the fact that it wasn't is even worse. Like, that's the worst thing. The fact that Inscription didn't get nominated, but not only did fucking Deathloop get nominated, but it actually won.
It's not good.
Terrible. Actually terrible. So, and then I decided to give Returnal the art direction nominee as well, because, like I said, this is a very H.R. Geiger inspired game, which I know is kind of a cheat, because we talked about Scorn last time, but this one is H.R. Geiger, but in a different way. Shit, I wouldn't even call it H.R. Geiger in a lot of ways. It's more, I guess it's more sort of just spindly, if that makes sense. It's a lot more just kind of spindly horror. Like I don't know how to describe it. Where it's like more corruption horror, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know, but it's a cool looking game. That's all I'm going to say. So, but yeah, as far as the best art direction goes, the award for best art direction goes to Inscription. This fucking game got shafted. The fact that this did not even get a nominee, I can never forgive them for that. I can never forgive the Game Awards for that. Like, this, again, the unique, etchy, woodsy vibe that the game has at first, it looks so cool. And again, the visual changes as well that this game goes through. Oh my god, it's one of the most unique games visually to come out just ever. And again, just the fact that fucking Deathloop won, let alone get nominated, and this game didn't, unforgivable. Like, I can never forgive the Game Awards for doing that. Absolutely disgraceful. So, especially since I remember getting absolutely pissed that Deathloop won. I'm never gonna let that down. So, it's a damn shame. But here at the Caspian Awards, we actually award genuine talent and effort. So, and not only genuine talent and effort, but exceeding expectations. And thankfully, Inscription was able to do that. All right, best narrative, best story, best telling of a, tale. So, again, this one is kind of a touchy one because if I'm going to be honest, a lot of the games that I was interested in from 2021, they weren't really narrative driven. So, admittedly, my picks are kind of just barely etching on, but at the end of the day, I still feel like that they were deserving of their placements. But what did the Game Awards have? Did they finally catch up their act? No. As a matter of fact, if I'm just gonna be frank, this is probably the worst okay, no, the Sim strategy one was probably... Nah, these are both equally as bad. Yeah, I mean, again, Deathloop was nominated fucking somehow. The fuck you ask me on exactly how that fucking fits in. Again, I can't really talk about Psychonauts 2 or It Takes Two. I respect both of those games, but I still disagree with those personally. And then Guardians of the Galaxy, no, I mean, it's not really... Again, it's not really a game that is worthy of being nominated for best narrative, I feel like. Especially like when you got so many other games that came out this year. So, and then of course we got Life is Strange True Colors, which okay. I've got a confession. I don't hate Life is Strange. I just don't really care for it. My friend Goldie fucking hates Life is Strange. Like it's like his least favorite fucking video game series of all time. I'm not in that camp. I'm just more apathetic about it, mostly because, again, I'm not into more, like, I'm not into smaller scale games. I just find those games absolutely fucking boring. So yeah, no. So yeah, no. This is another example of one where it's like I don't agree with any of the picks that were on here, like, at all. Like, okay, if I was being unbiased, I would be fine with, like, It Takes Two or Psychonauts 2. Because I respect those. But we're biased here, so it's not going to be allowed. But yeah, seriously, though, this is actually... Yeah, I do not like any of these nominees at all. And, of course, the one that won this... Guardians of the Galaxy. Like...
What? What?
Oh, I thought he was going to do that. But yeah, no, like... So yeah, basically what I ended up doing is doing exactly what I did with the multiplayer list on my 2022 list, and I just completely overhauled the entire thing because I fundamentally do not think that any of these games, or most of these games, should be on here. So because of that, I chose Returnal, Ratchet and Clank Village, or sorry, Resident Evil 8, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and Kena. Returnal was the one that I just had. I barely had to add. Because again, most of the games that came out in 2021 that I personally liked, they weren't really narrative driven, which is kind of the problem. So, like, they were more gameplay driven. So this was honestly the toughest category for me to try to find something. So again, I just basically said fuck it, and I just added Returnal. I don't know. 2020 year was just a garbage year for gaming for me. Like, there just wasn't anything that appealed to me. So yeah. But as far as games here is concerned, thankfully, the other two nominees are worthy contenders, and I've already explained reasonings as to why, but I don't want to go over those again. So let's get into the award. So, the award for Best Narrative of 2021 goes to... This one's actually going to surprise people. Resident Evil 8! Resident Evil Village. It won Best Narrative. So, I will admit, this one is kind of cheating. Because again, even the games that I have presented here aren't really narrative driven solely. Like, again, I mentioned with Kena and with Ratchet and Clank that they were solid stories. Yeah, Resident Evil 8, Ratchet and Clank, and Kena, I did say that they were solid stories. But the thing is that, like, more people talk about those games for their gameplay. So it was very, very, very difficult. But I ultimately ended up choosing Resident Evil 8. Partially because, admittedly, it just felt wrong not to give it an award. Up until now, it just did not feel right to me. But even then, I will fully admit, Resident Evil 8 has a really well-told continuation of Ethan's story from Resident Evil 7, and how this ties in to the overarching story of Resident Evil as a whole. I think that it was able to do those two things spectacularly, as well as just the general sort of storytelling within the game itself, with, Resident Evil lady. I know, her name's Demetreyu, but I don't care. I still love calling her Resident Evil lady. But whatever. You get the point, is that, like, moments like that, as well as the fucking, like, baby scene? I know it's technically not a baby, but like, fucking hell, that thing was terrifying. And even just like, when the game starts becoming more of an action game rather than like a straight up survival horror game, it was still able to at least keep that momentum up throughout the entire experience. So at the end of the day, I felt like it was just the right call to have Resident Evil 8 on here. So, especially, I had to give it the nod somewhere. So, it did not feel right to not have it somewhere. So, but yeah. Good job, Resident Evil 8. You're a really damn good game. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, that leads us to the final award of the night. Game of the Year. What is, in my opinion, the best game to represent 2021? So, did the Game Awards finally choose good nominees? Actually, not terrible, except for one, Deathloop. Yeah, again, fucking game journalists were fucking jerking themselves off with Deathloop the entire goddamn year. I don't know why. They were so fucking high on Deathloop. It's not even that good of a game. It's like a 5 out of 10 game. That's not Game of the Year material. Although, spoiler alert for this one, they did not win Game of the Year. Thank God. And as for the other nominees, Metroid Dread, fair. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Again, the game does kind of look last gen, or shit, even like Wii era at times. But gameplay holds it up, and it's a solid sort of, platform adventure game. And I respect that. Resident Evil 8, like I just said, fair enough pick. It was a genuinely solid game throughout. And, well, I don't even need to say anything about what I talked about with Ratchet and Clank, because I feel like I would be repeating myself. And again, It Takes Two and Psychonauts 2, I respect both of those. I just personally disagree. Respectively, though. Mostly because, again, Psychonauts, I don't think is my thing. I am willing to play Psychonauts 2, though. Like, if I do end up getting the game at some point, whether it be on a console or on PC, I am more than happy to try Psychonauts 2 to see if it's any better. So that one is just more so, as of right now, I'm not too sure. So keep that in mind. And as for It Takes Two, again, I respect it. I think that as far as cooperative games go, as well as just kind of being able to work with, like, basically, like, forced co-op games go, it's a pretty cute and fun experience. It's just not my personal thing. It did end up winning Game of the Year, though, which, while I disagree, I actually do respect that for this. It's not like with me with Baldur's Gate 3 or for the game that won 2020. So it's not that type of fucking disagree. This one's just kind of more of a, this isn't what I would have chosen. So, but what are the nominees that I went with? You're sensing a pattern with the nominees that I've been giving a lot. Kena, Resident Evil 8, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. They've appeared in all three of these categories. Well, okay, Resident Evil, never mind. Resident Evil 8 was not in art direction, but Ratchet and Clank and Kena were. And that's because, honestly, those three games I do consider to be the best games of 2021. Hands down. Kena as the best indie game, And as far as established games from their respective, decades, Resident Evil 8 for Resident Evil of the 90s, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart for Ratchet and Clank of the 2000s. I think that they represent everything that was, and I guess Metroid Dread in the sense for like the 80s. I think that those games genuinely do deserve the praise that they get. And again, I'm glad that Metroid, Ratchet, and Resident Evil, they got nominated. Again, I feel like Kena was just shafted just a little bit, a lot actually. I'm not gonna lie to myself. She got shafted a lot. So, and thankfully we already gave her an award. So let's see what the winner is. The last award of the night. So, in my opinion, out of all these games that we talked about tonight, the Game of the Year award for 2021 goes to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Again, a bit biased, but this would have been my choice for Game of the Year for 2021. Again, It Takes Two, respectable choice, but if I had to choose from the nominees that the Game Awards had, and I do remember, I did vote for Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, because fundamentally, this game was a return to form that was desperately needed from Ratchet and Clank, especially considering that the 2010s was a pretty rough decade for the little fella. I mean, not to say that every single game from the 2010s with Ratchet and Clank were bad, and they do have their fans. All for One, Full Frontal Assault, Into the Nexus, and the 2016 remake of the original game, they do have their fans. And if you like those games, that's fine. But they just do not mesh well with the classic era and even the future games. So, to see a game kind of go back, at least to the future era. We're not quite back at the OG Ratchet and Clank era, which is my personal favorite era of Ratchet and Clank, keep in mind. But at least going back to what people liked about the future games, that's pretty respectable to see. And again, I already mentioned this before, but the game is fucking beautiful. Like, this is easily one of the best games. As far, like, one of the best games visually. Like, it is honestly a piece of art. Like, if you guys want proof that games can be art, this, and frankly, I'll even talk about Kena in this example. Those are prime examples of games that I will use from now on, to describe as visual art. They are stunning. And as well, also, the new character, specifically Rivet. Rivet's a fucking badass character, and I'm glad that she is a welcome addition to the cast. Like, I already talked about this earlier, but no, she's not some fucking quote-unquote woke agenda who's trying to replace Ratchet. If you think that, you're actually a fucking idiot and you're a sexist. Get the fuck out. But she actually adds to, she's actually an addition to the story and the narrative and just sort of the dynamic that Ratchet already has. And hell, I'll even straight up say this. If the series ends up having her, like, be used as, like, a spinoff series, fuck it, I'm all for it. And also, of course, just the expanded gameplay with, a lot of the new weapons, the new environments, and most importantly, again, the fact that this game shifts between two different versions of the same map, like in an instant, shows to me that this is the first good representation of next gen hardware, or current gen now, but this is proof that we are in next gen. So, and I will forever say this, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, in my opinion, is the best game for 2021. Obviously, best to describe something as like the best game is very subjective. Keep that in mind. But for me personally, if I wanted to talk about a game that represented the best to come out of a year, Rift Apart easily wins that in my category, or in my books. And in my opinion, it deserves to be in the Game of the Year Hall of Fame. So, which, by the way, I may do that on my wiki. So, keep an eye for that. Keep an eye on that. So, just to recap, these are all the games that got awards. Best Indie Game went to Kena, Bridge of Spirit, Kena, whatever, Kena, I think it's Kena Bridge of Spirits. Best Action Adventure Game went to Hitman 3. Best RPG went to Monster Hunter Rise. Best Shooter Game went to Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Best Sim Strategy went to Age of Empires 4. Best Multiplayer went to Monster Hunter Rise. Best DLC went to Doom Eternal, Ancient Gods Part 2. Best Remake /Remaster went to Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Best Art Direction went to Inscription. Best Narrative went to Resident Evil 8. And Game of the Year went to Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. So, nice. As for personal top 10 favorites of the year, it should be pretty obvious which ones were Monster Hunter Rise, Rift Apart, Kena, Resident Evil 8, Hitman 3, Hell Let Loose, GTFO, Inscription, Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and then Total War Remastered. No, in no particular order, by the way. Keep that in mind. And, well, this year was 2021, so you know what that means. Guilty pleasures. You guys already know what game came out in 2021 that would have gotten no award, because I'm principled and I am someone who recognizes that it is another game that had a shit launch and it should have got its launch right. I hold games accountable, unlike a lot of other people, but I still like it because admittedly it's a guilty pleasure of mine. But let's talk about the games that came out before, because that game came out at the end of the year. So, okay, guilty pleasures, Crest Tales, because I actually think that the visual aesthetics of that game is pretty cool. I mean, there's better games, but I just think the game looks cool. Oddworld Soulstorm, I know it's an inferior remake of Abe's Exodus. I know, which is why I did not qualify it, but I still think it looks fine, personally. Same thing with Evil Genius 2. I know it's an inferior game, but I just can't help but just appreciate the work that came into it. Same thing with Nick All-Star Brawl, especially when they finally added Jenny Wakeman to the game. I know that doesn't really mean anything as far as, like, you know, talking about games, but, like, I don't fucking care, like, whatever. Oh shoot. I forgot to add one more game. Let me add in one more game to this. Because, again, this game, I was kind of hard-pressed to add, like, I definitely would not have added this game to the, thing, mostly because a lot of people gave this game a lot of shit, which in some ways, rightfully so. I kind of liked Far Cry 6's setting. Like, I know, like, a lot of people gave this game a lot of shit when it came out. Again, some of that criticism I do think is warranted, mostly just mostly because of just Ubisoft fatigue. I totally understand that. I just think that the aesthetics look is just way better than Far Cry 5's. I don't know. Far Cry 5 is just one of those games where it's just, in my opinion, it's the easy Far Cry 5, except for Far Cry 1. Far Cry 1 straight up sucks. Don't at me. But as far as like, besides that, Far Cry 5 is just kind of the weakest. And for me, if Far Cry 6 was Far Cry 5, that would have been way better. Especially since it has Garcia Exposito in it. Like, Exposito, he's great. So, and then of course Halo Infinite, again, like I mentioned earlier with the shooting category, I just could not in good faith at it because of the stupid progression in multiplayer, and also just for its admittedly bare bones campaign, and especially what they did with a certain character, which I will never forgive, which I've talked about in one of my podcast episodes. So, yeah. And, well, do I need I say more with the game above me? Need I say more? I mean, need I say more? Need I say more? Need I say more? Actually, shit. Where's my other shirt? I have a second shirt. Yes, I have a second shirt. Shut up. Like, fucking. God damn it! Why is this not? Need I say fuck more? This is signed, by the way. Actually, I just realized this was over a year ago now. Damn. Yeah, this got signed by Kelly. Need I say more? Need I say more? Again, I gave the game a 6 out of 10 because I still think game launched like shit. I gave that much shit to Cyberpunk and to Battlefield 2042. I know it got a lot of shit, but I like the game, and also, I mean, you already know.
In the freeze to cut these lips, I love you.
So that's it. That was the Game of the Years, or the Caspian Game Awards. So yeah, that was the Caspian Game Awards. I hope you guys did enjoy this, because I think this is a pretty cool shit. Why is this being pissed? Fucking sorry, the fucking there we go. But yeah, that was the Caspian Game Awards. I hope you guys did thoroughly enjoy. If you guys did, make sure to hit that follow button down below and turn the bell icon down below so that you'll be notified exactly when I'll be streaming. Again, I think I'll probably do these every Saturday, or as many Saturdays as I can, because next month I will be going to a few other conventions, so do keep that in mind. But as far as other things go, yeah, like for me personally, as far as like that things go, I will make sure that this is a weekly series. So if you guys want to check that out, of course, hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly when I'm streaming. While you guys are at it, make sure to check out the links down below as well, specifically the Discord, the SoundCloud, and all the links down below as well. If you want, you can also hit the subscribe button. If you can't do that, that's completely fine. I'm so glad that you guys took time to watch this. But regardless of all that, though, make sure to share the stream to other people as well and continue to be awesome in the process. But until then, I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night, guys, and stay safe.